Okay. Hey, good afternoon to Fire Engineering Humpday Hangout with Traditions Training and the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. The International Society of Fire Service Instructors took the show for us last week. I'll explain about that here in 1 minute. But welcome to everybody. We're about a month away and a couple weeks from Fire Engineering's big show there in Indianapolis, and we're all excited to get back out there. Teach them in-person classes, and I actually have a good group there. So it's not rescheduled. It's not, halfway through the year. It's our normal time, and we can't wait to get out there with Chief Halton and the entire crew and push that forward. So today's session is the second part of the Humpday Hangout that we started on January 5th. We originally just wanted to do that in February. But there was a tragic fire in the city of Baltimore where on January 24th, 2022, in the 200 block of South Stricker Street, that unfortunately killed 3 Baltimore City firefighters, Lieutenant Paul Bertram of Truck 23, Lieutenant Kelsey Sadler of Engine 14, and firefighter Kenny Lacayo of Engine 14, and injured John McMaster of Engine 14. So the day of the Humpday Hangout was the funeral for all 3 of those heroes in Baltimore, and all our Traditions Training instructors attended the funeral or backfilled the firehouses. And obviously we have more than a couple instructors that work for Baltimore City that attended those funerals. So we were unable to get on there. So we just want to make sure that we paid our respects to those 3 heroes from the Baltimore City Fire Department that gave their lives trying to save the lives of trapped occupants in a structure there in Baltimore. So we pray for them and their families. So today on here we have Roger Stager of Traditions Training, and Josh Perchick. Josh has done a couple shows with us, done a great program on another unfortunate line of duty death in Howard County. If you go to any of the Traditions Training social media, you can track that down. He did an unbelievable Zoom podcast for us, and we recorded that and put it out there so everybody can see it. I can't even remember, Josh, did you even get a chance to go out to FDIC and present that, or?
No, the entire family got sick with COVID.
That's right. I knew there was something there that I remember that couldn't do. But are you going to present this year, or do we have to push that back?
We're gonna have to push it back. So until next year. We had more family obligations that already popped up.
I understand. So, and then Roger will be out there working with Champ, doing a hot class, and obviously we have a couple of instructors from Traditions out there doing some hot classes. Some in-person classes, the hour 45-minute sessions. The big deal for us is that 2 of our instructors are giving the keynote address on Wednesday and Thursday. So Dan Shaw, who is not allergic to water and served on an engine company most of his life, is doing Wednesday's class. That is right after Chief Halton. Like, I really want to follow Chief Halton at FDIC, getting all those people wound up. And Dan's is Sharpen Your Axe. I don't know why Dan would do a Sharpen Your Axe as his title, considering he's never used one, but apparently that's the name of his keynote address. And then on Thursday, Doug Mitchell will be doing his, and that's right at the opening ceremonies, and that's it's called Evolution U: Mission, Motivation, and Mindset. So Doug's going to talk a lot about, as much as the fire service has changed, it kind of stays the same, and it's all about the people. So, but today's session, after we get past all that, is about the engine company, and there's probably not a busier fire duty engine company. One of the heaviest duty fire duty engine companies in the country is Engine 8 in Baltimore City, and that's where Roger works. He's put together a great engine company presentation. He's going this weekend to New England to deliver it, and he'll be on the Eastern Shore of Maryland on March 12th to deliver it also. So, this is kind of a little bit of snippets from his class, but we kind of rolled it off with, we're going to catch up where we left off on January 5th is talking about the upfront investment of the engine company. And that terminology is obviously, it's a Larry Schultz term that all of us picked up on, is that that is, investing in your personnel, investing in your company, and, to make it better. So both Roger and Josh both run with 4-person engine companies, but we'll kind of get them to explain what each one of those roles are of each person that sits on their engine company. And then obviously some of the things, the roles and responsibilities that each one of those has on the fire ground. So Roger, it's your program, boss. You go ahead and lead it off.
Your program, I'm just here with it. So thanks for having me. Like we were going through back in January, mainly dealing with discussing knowledge and area familiarization, equipment familiarization, but which is the knowledge that you need to begin with, and then going with the upfront investment, focusing mainly on the roles and responsibility of the personnel. So having designated riding positions, whether it be a specific seat or if it's a specific title, depending on what kind of jurisdiction you're operating in or how you respond. So everybody quickly knows, okay, I'm in the nozzle position, whether it be the seat or the position, you know what you're responsible for, what your roles are. Same with if you're a backup personnel or the apparatus operator, the driver. So wherever. So we'll go ahead and start off with the apparatus driver. So reiterating what we talked about with the area knowledge, the equipment knowledge. He needs to be a wizard with that apparatus, understanding the proper running routes, whether it changes for time of day or any weather or anything else that he or she's been monitoring throughout the day, if there's closed streets for presidential visits or anything like that, depending on your jurisdiction. So going into the officer, everybody runs it a little bit differently. So it'll be good to get everybody's feedback on what they're responsible for. Some engines in Baltimore, the officer has to begin with some forcible entry, where fortunately we've been fortunate at 8 engine. More times than not, we're coming out of the same firehouse with truck 10. So the officer of the engine can focus on engine stuff and doesn't usually, he may have to help or assist with forcible entry, but it's not his primary job. Whereas like with Sean Dwyer, another one of our instructors who's at engine 14, oftentimes they're ahead of the engine, ahead of the ladder truck. So he may have to begin forcible entry after his size up, which probably is the case with Josh at some of the places he has to venture to now as a floating officer in Howard County. And then nozzle personnel, pipe man, linemen, depending on your jargon or where you go from. The roles and responsibilities not as easy as just open and close as some people think. And then the importance of the backup person or hydrant person, layout, whatever you're calling it. So in Baltimore, for us, it's between the officer and the pump operator, they have the running route dialed in, how to get there. They're staying in constant communication throughout the run, not negligent or just random talk, but pertinent stuff. It's the odd street, or odd number. It'll be on this side of the street. Looks like a high number. Maybe we go around the block to get the closer hydrant. Everything feedback wise, so everybody's dialed in, making sure it's clear what we are, what our role is. So again, with the role, our due position will determine what we're responsible for. So everybody make sure everybody's on the same page, as well as so we know, okay, if we're going to the rear, there's a good chance that we're going to have to run a longer line than if we're in the front. If it's our area, more than likely going to be a row home, depending on where we're going, whether it's going to be a private dwelling, single family dwelling, or a commercial building. So all things to start prepping and going through what's in our head. So with that, the officer then, does a real good job most of the time reading notes, staying up to date on anything, any potential notes that are popping up in the CAD, just further information that we can know. And if it's not something you'll see maybe newer or some officers aren't used to using the technology or where it is. So they'll just sit there and blow the siren. Whereas the more informed, the more step up officers will go through trying to get as much information as possible on the way. Maybe it was dispatched as an intersection or 100 block. More calls are coming in, or the notes beg to differ. Oh, it's actually the street over. The original calling party was calling because and said behind them, but that sometimes is information that's not relayed to us. So then that can change things, and just maintaining, turning around or yelling back to the crew to let us know any of the potential changes or whatnot. So we're all informed. We're not getting there and oh my God, it's actually this. So with we try to train our backstop firemen, firefighters enough that to make the call on the hose selection, not to have to be told by the officer which one, unless it's something out of the ordinary where maybe the officer sees something the firefighter doesn't. But typically the firefighter is responsible for which hose line selection he makes. So whether the length or the diameter, and it goes from there. For us, our fourth person, if we're the first due company or the second due company, is responsible for getting a hydrant and going to the front or the rear of the dwelling for a water supply. Our fourth person will get off at the hydrant and remain at the hydrant until a company gets there to charge it, depending on how far away. If it's only a couple sections, oftentimes the pump operator is good enough that they can handle it. So the fourth person is right in the mix, which so Josh, you want to cover how you handle things in Howard with specific breakup?
Hey, Jess, let me ask Roger a couple questions before you start rolling there. So Roger, one is that in the city of Baltimore, the driver, is there any kind of map books or anything like that, or do they have to know the streets?
We do have map books. Well, we had map books, but they typically sat either in a divider in between the officer and driver in the back of the cab on top of the doghouse, or they sat in a roll-up compartment in the back of the cab. So it was really a necessity. They were mainly for if you got transferred across town into an area you were unfamiliar with. Now everything's on the computer. We had a really good map system at one point where it was pretty user friendly and easy to operate while going down the road. One of the more recent updates, it seems to have altered it a little bit, so it's a little bit harder. The hydrants may or may not populate on the map, so that makes it real interesting for engine companies, as well as I haven't worked in a couple of weeks. You can tell from the beard, but the last time I worked a couple weeks ago, our computer updated, and the level that you had to zoom in to actually see where the hydrant location was took all sense of direction away from you as to what streets were what and what direction. So usually all the good apparatus operators, truck drivers, tillermen, or EVDs, as well as the pump operators, have a real good knowledge of the area. And that's a constant communication between the officer and the driver that hopefully between them, they'll dial it in. So my lieutenant was a pump operator for a few years at the engine just next to us, at 13 engine. So between the pump operator and him and my lieutenant, they have the general area, our first alarm district, not just everything that we're taking up until like second alarms. They're pretty dialed in. They might have to look it up a little bit just to see if it's a smaller street far out that we normally wouldn't be on, but for the most part, the drivers need to know where they're going. And one thing that separates some of the good companies from the standard or the mediocre is that you'll see who does that, the street drills and the knowledge and who's participating in them. If it's some places you'll go, the officers just handing out streets, or the officer sitting in the office while the pump operator and the back step guys are the ones doing the drill. The good places, everybody's involved. Oftentimes we'll sit around the table and you'll see the lieutenant of the truck and the lieutenant of the engine right there in the mix. Some of the shifts, the chief's even out there going through stuff. So, and just it transforms usually from a knowledge area drill into, oh, remember there was a fire here, and the mains in that area or the water mains in that area kind of suck, or this one's you wouldn't think's really good, but it's actually 20 inches or 36 inches. So little things like that to pick up on and pay attention to.
But I mean, you have a pretty good hiring system since you guys tried to burn down half the city in 1904. So
yeah, it's not as good as you would think. It's a lot of 6-inch mains.
Probably still wouldn't too. So that's,
I would not doubt that.
So explain when you said dues, explain to the people that are listening what a due is in Baltimore City.
So we run 5 engine companies on a box alarm. So each position, so the first due engine, the second due engine, third due, fourth due, fifth due, has a set specific tasks from the beginning. So already in our SOPs, general orders, whatever you call them, in your jurisdiction, they already have a guideline on what they're responsible for, whether it be water supply, covering a water supply, ensuring a water supply, what side of the building, roughly that you should go to. So for us, our first due engine is responsible for water supply and going to the front or whatever we deem as the primary side of the building.
So that is laying a supply line.
That is
water source.
Yeah, that is a positive forward lay supply line in the street. If it's something other than that, it has to be verbalized. But 99% of the time for us, it'll be a hydrant on the way in. So it's in the street. It doesn't have to be charged or anything before we begin our attack. It just has to be in the street to ensure that there's been steps taken for a positive water supply.
Okay, sorry.
And through drill and incidents and experience, you get that down to it's a real long wait time. I know some people in the world believe that it takes hours to actually put hose in the street, but it should take not more than 10 seconds. And to stop, slow down and stop in the area of a hydrant and one member to get off and put that hose in the street should be less than 10 seconds.
So first due does that. Go and follow up with what the other dues do. I'm sorry.
Second due. Our second due, similar to the District of Columbia, is responsible for water supply, a positive water supply going to the opposite side of the structure as the first due. So whether the first due goes to the alpha side and the second due goes to the Charlie side, majority of our stuff is the first due will go to the address side and the second due is going to the alley. Oftentimes our alleys aren't big enough for us to drive down, so we have to position at one of the ends, or if there's a split in on the other side of the street or whatnot, to be able to stretch to, we're responsible for the opposite side of the building to include, once we get back there, a size up of what we have. So the third due for us is our RIT company or fast company. Upon their arrival, they go to the ladder truck and get the tools and equipment, the RIT pack, the fast pack off the ladder truck, take a position on the alpha side or the entry point for the most part for the first due engine. Have the tools gathered there. They're allowed to be a proactive RIT, so they can assist in getting other ladders up if needed, getting bars off windows, removing if there's a security door. A lot of our houses have security doors before the front door, so if that ends up being a hindrance or a hazard, they'll remove that, get that out of the way so the hose is easily if the first dude needs a little bit of assistance, just helping to get a little bit of line in there, making sure it's flaked out, whatever the case may be, anything other than just standing there not paying attention. A lot of times the officers or the senior firefighters will do their own size of the building. If it's a single family, or able to get a peek to the rear or whatnot. And we like to treat it as like a little assistance between the chief and the other company. So if we see something, we relay the message to the chief if maybe they don't see it. And for us, the fourth due engine will cover the first due engine's hydrant. So ensuring their water supply, covering their hydrant, covering their water supply, whatever. Hooking up if it is necessary. We use a hydrant assist valve so they can connect to it to assist the pressure, charging the supply line if it's needed or hasn't been done yet. And then our fifth due does the same for the second due engine. Once the apparatus, the fourth and fifth due are parked at the hydrants, the personnel will go up to the appropriate engine. So whether it be the first due or the second due engine, we'll go up, stretch a backup line, stretch a second line, or whatever is warranted. The fourth due engine will always stretch a line, whether it's off their engine company or off the first due engine company, to ensure that there's a backup line or a second line in place to go behind that first due.
All right, and in Baltimore City, this occurs in minutes, like a few minutes most of the time.
Yes, typically in a lot of this, good majority of the city, you'll have 3 to 4 lines off and in position to operate within 2 minutes of the first engine arriving.
Okay, because that'll be a little different when we talk to Josh, trying to get how many units are actually going to be on the scene. So I mean, I think that's part of the pieces that what works for Baltimore City is great for Baltimore City. It's not going to work for Josh in Howard County, because he also has that thing. Those big trucks that have to carry a lot of water. I try not to pronounce what they are. In our world we call them tankers. Of course in the West Coast, they call them tenders. But so Josh, I guess that's all the questions I have for Roger to kind of follow up to make sure everybody kind of understood. So let's talk about the roles and responsibilities and the upfront investments that we have to do with Howard County, with you.
Sure, yeah. So a lot of similarities, I believe, just throughout Maryland, but Howard County specifically, we're sandwiched right in between DC and Baltimore, smack dab in the center of Maryland, for those that aren't familiar. But starting with the driver, they're largely the ones that, hey, get us to where we're going and do it safely. We don't really operate with map books anymore. We're using the computers, the mobile data terminals, and that's given us our running routes. We also use the active 911 system. So it's the app-based system for our phones, and it's actually given us a lot of security when other things aren't working. But yeah, the driver's getting us to where we're going. And it's awesome jumping up in the front seat, say we're first due to a box, and that driver's like, hey, I know exactly where I'm going and I got the hydrant for you. It's an amazing feeling. But with backup drivers, maybe newly promoted, transfers, that may not always happen. And you jump in and they're like, hey, left or right, where are we going? And so as an officer, I got to be Johnny on the spot and figure out the most direct route to where we're going, based on time of day, traffic, and all that. Officer, they are finding the best possible running route. They're taking all the information in that's coming up on the mobile data terminal on the computers. And I'm taking just the necessary things that I need and giving that to my firefighters in the back. So sometimes there's too much information coming in. And I know from military circles, you almost get test saturated when you get all this influx of information. So you got to be able to weed through it quickly, determine what's the most important and how it's going to affect things. And I start sharing that information personally with the firefighters in the back, so they have an idea of what's going on. I remember being in the back and you get off and you're like, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing, because everything was happening up front. So if I'm going to call out, hey, as soon as we turn into this flag lot, second house on the right, last 2 numbers are 32. should have reported fires on the second floor in a bedroom. Already that firefighter can start thinking, I know at least what side of the engine I'm going to. I have an idea of what line I'm going to pull. I'm in the back of a flag lot, so probably keeping room for the truck, or maybe got to pull a longer line. And it gets the wheels turning for them. It's getting them involved without getting them, too sucked into all the information that's coming across.
All right, Josh, what's a flag lot?
All right, so good question. Flag lot, that's the term we use for, say you're in a residential, like suburban type setup, and you're going down the road. A flag lot is like a long driveway off of a residential road that has multiple houses on it. So we're calling those flag lots.
Pipe stem. Got it.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, all good. Nozzle firefighter. If that is somebody that's coming with a little experience, or maybe I've worked with them for a little while, they're going to be responsible for pulling the line. Normally, I try not to dictate what line they're pulling unless I see a curveball being thrown at us. I try to leave that up to the nozzle firefighter. Now, if they are fresh out of the academy, not coming with a lot of experience, maybe I haven't worked with that person, I'll start calling that out. And again, that's going to come with the information. Hey, pull the 300 attack to, this side of the street, look for these numbers. And then our backup person, it's somewhat dependent on the company officer and what assignment they have and what expectations they have in place. But largely in our culture, the backup person is not going to be the person that lays out. That's going to be the driver. So for forward, reverse lay, split lay, I'm going to call that over the radio. But a lot of times what we found in our culture, it speeds it up a little bit. You've got the driver who's not dressed out in turnout gear. They can pop the brake, perform the layout, jump back in and go. And the firefighter is just worrying about line deployment. That's what we have found has worked for us. And that's pretty common in our culture right now. And then second due, or the second due ambulance, maybe even the first due ambulance, they're going to complete that connection. So we have that positive water source if we're in an area with hydrants. And then as soon as we hop off the engine, lines are coming off and I'm giving the size up. So size up for us, we're looking for key information, like the building construction, number of floors, location and extent of fire, any red flags that might be popping up for us. Obviously, water supply, I usually try to start with that. And then I'm going to be performing a 360. I got to determine if I'm going to be establishing command or not. And then, I'm setting the tone for the strategy and tactics for the first due, as the first due officer. Now we're kind of going through some growing, I don't want to say pains right now, but we're going through some cultural changes. Just, I'm coming up on 20 years in the fire service altogether, and I've probably gone through 4 iterations of general orders. Sometimes we're order driven, where our general orders dictating the running assignments for the engines and ladder trucks. Right now we're in this middle ground of being more command driven and having more of that blue card West Coast style, but it's melded with our general orders. And that's some changes that we're going through because of the line of duty we had in 2018. Sometimes officers are just getting task saturated. There's too much coming in, and the command officers are talking about line deployment and telling what the third due engine they've got to do. So we're kind of rewinding that a little bit. And I think our newest iteration, we're going back to more of that command driven, but we still have the ability to deviate, but we just have to be able to communicate that clearly. There is a time and a place where we need to be able to stage units. We have a couple of high hazard locations in our jurisdiction where we know that we need to stage everybody out and we need to go find where this fire is and what exactly is going on. Once we find that, then we can start calling units in. If it were something that is order driven and everybody just takes assignments based on what information we have, it could cause more chaos. So we need to be able to deviate, have that ability to be able to communicate that clearly, keep people out. But is that being the standard, especially for single families, residential, guard apartments, mid-rises, all that? I think it's got us in a little bit more trouble, or like I said, becoming more task saturated than it's probably necessary. So more changes actually probably in the coming weeks for us. But getting back to just roles and responsibilities of the individual engine company, that's pretty common for what's in our culture right now.
All right. And Roger, last in January, we talked about hose packages and nozzle packages and all that sort of stuff. Like,
yes. Yeah,
okay.
we discussed some of the different options out there or whatnot. Mainly it was the the stressor that we hit on was knowing what you have, knowing the intricacies, knowing what it's capable of, the disadvantages or cons are of what you have. If you're in a position where you can make a change to order different hose or order different nozzles, to figure out to not just go off of somebody on the internet's word, but figure out what works best for you, what you're trying to accomplish. And I know like Elkhart does a dynamite job of showing up and doing flows with you, using your hose and your apparatus to dial in what you're trying to do. Can't speak for the others, but I know they do a dynamite job. Some of the hose manufacturers are right there with them, and they'll come to your jurisdiction and work with you on what you're actually trying to accomplish. So know what's out there, know how to use it. Like we found some discrepancies with Mercedes hose that we were using on flow rates and friction loss, and not getting a good pump pressure based on different things. So we've had to go out and figure out why that is and how to overcome it in the quickest and easiest way. So if we can recognize it and on the street when it occurs and fix it, so we're not dealing with it. So that's, no matter what you have, know what the capabilities are and what the limitations are.
Yeah, I know we did a bunch of flow testing and nozzles, using the Elkhart nozzles, using a hose man, using key hose. Is that we got to the point where is that we can't use the formulas to figure anything out anymore. It's just like, hey, this is your 400-foot 1.75" with a 75 150 nozzle. This is what you need to pump it at to get the flow that is required at the end. And the math doesn't work, from the pump to the nozzle and the nozzle or nozzle back to the pump. It's just, but we all know the dependability of flow meters. The flow meter is actually inside the pump, not at the nozzle. So even those aren't as accurate, so it's been quite a challenge to just go, hey, pump it at this, because that's what we, calculated this at, with the 400-foot line, the 200-foot line, the 100-foot line stretched out, and with the nozzle operating and flowing. So Josh, I'm sorry, Roger.
No, I was going to say even models of hose from the same manufacturer operate differently. So don't think just because it's key hose or it's whatever hose that it's going to be the same as the next station over or whatnot. Josh, has Howard standardized hose amongst everything? I know, or nozzles. I know when I worked there, kind of the county bought one thing. Each volunteer corporation could buy their own stuff, which could play a significant role. And you have 3 different corporations on a fire ground, or if you're detailed or working overtime at another firehouse, how you would have to end up knowing to pump it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going through those changes as well. We're much more in line, at least with the nozzles, as far as using Elkhart. The breakaway fog nozzles, the 50 or 75 and 175 gallons, and then handful of smooth bores. It's also a little bit cultural and a little bit of what the company officer for that station dictates what they want. So there are some that are going to be almost all fog, or maybe they have one smooth bore on it. Where I was at 7, we had a couple smooth bore nozzles, and then you get into the nuances of 15/16 and 7/8. It's like talking out Yankees and Red Sox about, people will live and die by that little measurement. So we had a lot of fun just, within the station figuring that out. So nozzles are definitely better. We've, I think, largely switched to key, but we do have a fair amount, and we're going through a ton of apparatus changes right now also. Buying, purchasing, some of our stuff's clean cab. So we're dealing with a whole mess of a lot of different things right now across a lot of different manufacturers. So I challenge the company officers and the drivers and the senior firefighters to get out there and check flow rates. We were finding that we would try multiple nozzles, different hose, and we found out pretty quickly that as long as we're getting 50 PSI at the tip for a smooth bore, we can extend lines out to 600 feet and be well within common operating pressures for our engines. Because we wanted to know without a shadow of a doubt, what can we do? What's our limitations, and where can we push? So I challenge the officers and drivers to get out there and find out exactly what it is, because these equations that we're getting from our fire schools, the equations are changing every 5 to 10 years anyway. I know new drivers that are coming up, they learn different equations than what I learned compared to what the generation before me learned. So it's all over the place. And just like Ricky said, sometimes you just come up with set numbers once you figure out, and we have to reverse engineer our own thing, because what we're coming out with these schools doesn't always equate to what's happening in the street.
Yeah, well, I was quite shocked at the amount of friction loss we had just in the piping. We have, really small, 29-foot wagons or engines or whatever you want to call them. And the amount of bends that it has to make to reach the back of the pumper, it created a lot of friction loss between the discharge valve and the piping at the end. So Josh, I was a little, another question I have for you, before I ask Roger a couple questions, is that, when you said, based on their experience, you let the firefighter choose the attack line. So I meant, how does a firefighter how does he get to choose the attack line for you? I mean, what do you have to, if you can get what I'm getting at, I mean,
yeah, sure.
How do you train this person to make these good decisions for you?
Yeah, I will try to make this a short answer. So much of this is based around just first setting the expectation. These are what I expect of my firefighters, number one. And then I think what's a little bit newer in our culture, and that I think we have to do a better job of, is also, as a company officer, I need to be able to explain the why behind it. There are certain firefighters out there that they're like, nah, it's kind of a, do as you're told, or don't ask questions, or maybe that's the way it's always been done. And some of that's okay. I'm good with the tradition, but I need to be held accountable for my decisions. And sometimes being able to provide the why for the firefighter is going to either, one, challenge my ideas, or it's going to make me more resolute in them if I can back them up. So I'm providing expectations. I'm providing the why behind it. Maybe there's history there, experience there to back it up. And then that firefighter is going to have more buy-in for the expectations that I'm placing on them. Next thing that's going to happen from there is we're getting in sets and reps. It's absolutely the crawl, walk, run training. And I'm sure that's a conversation we can get into, but we're going to start really basic. As soon as they're out of there, they're coming out of fire school. We're starting with our most commonly deployed attack lines. And I'm telling them exactly how we're pulling it. I'm showing them, I'm showing that person just literally step by step. This is how we do it. This is why we're doing it this way. And this is how I expect you to do it from here on out. And then from there, we're just going to keep going. Then we're going to start spreading out, and I'm going to start adding stressors. So we're going to start in the front parking lot, or the front ramp of the engine bay, and we're pulling lines in a wide open space. Then I'm going to move it to where maybe we're going inside the engine bay and I'm closing the doors to make it tighter. Then I'm going to go out on the street, and I'm a big fan of jumping on real estate sites in the morning to use them as size up drills to get the entire company involved with, potential fires that we may run within our first due. And a lot of times those houses might be vacant. So maybe we'll go to that house, or maybe we'll go to somewhere in the neighborhood, and we're going to start pulling lines through neighborhoods where we're not going to get in trouble. Then I'm going to start spicing that up. We're going to go to garden apartments. We're going to make friends with neighbors, and we're going to start doing hoseline deployments within garden apartments and figuring out stairwells, colleges, or parking garages. Then we're going to start, working the hoseline deployment for how do you manage it with stairs? Is it charged? Is it uncharged? Are you on air in your gear with a charged hoseline, and you got to make a push up steps? So I'm constantly going to just keep increasing the pressure. I don't start with that, because immediately they're just going to get saturated and they're going to check out. So I got to do that crawl, walk, run thing. And again, we can get deeper into that and what that means. But over time, they'll start to understand, I need this much line. They can be able to determine lengths of lines. So we're going to talk about, maybe standard suburbia from house to house in our planned communities might be 75 feet between front doors of houses. So if I'm 2 houses away, where we park the wagon, they know, bam, that's 150 feet from where the pumper's sitting to the front door of the next house. And if the fire's on the first floor, 200-foot attack line, we're going to be able to handle whatever we need to all day. So they're going to, in townhouse community, a lot of times people are pulling lines that are way too long. So, if you think that you've got a set of townhouses at the end of the row on the opposite end of where you're at, each townhome might be 20 feet wide. There's 5 away, that's 100 feet. So we're starting to give them ideas of how they can make their own decisions. So once we have the expectations in place, the training, a little bit of experience, and then that trust among us, they're going to go ahead, they're going to start pulling those lines. And if there's any quick questions that need to happen, we'll have a super quick conversation. And again, if I don't have that trust in them, I'll give them a quick conversation. Hey, right side, look for the last numbers that are 18, and you're going to pull the 300-foot attack line, and you're humping about 3 houses down on the right. That should all happen in 20 seconds or less, and they're already taking off, and hopefully I don't have to worry about them. They're going to hold up at the front door. I'm going to do my 360, my size up, and we're going to make the push together. So that's happening over time. It's definitely not day one, but it's something that we can build up. And the more steps and reps we get, the faster it's going to happen.
All right, so Roger, we've come a long way from the 300-foot 1-inch booster reel that was the primary line on a Baltimore City engine for decades. That that they would pull the 300-foot booster line. So obviously that's changed a lot. We're doing an article about Engine 8 for Fire Apparatus Magazine, and we talked a lot about the hose lines on there. So like I said, Engine 8 Baltimore goes to a lot of working fires. So you guys just don't do it by going to working fires. How do you get your practice in? How does a busy engine company get this practice in and make it work for them?
So you have to have a plan, and the investment in the people and the right people. Sometimes the attitude might not be there at the beginning of the day. Everybody had something going on or whatnot, but cultivating a culture of humility and wanting to learn, wanting to be better, striving to be the best, and holding each other accountable. You hold yourself and the guy next to you accountable for wanting to be that better person, to get out there and train. And we'll start off most days, we'll have some sort of plan that we want to get done. We used to, one period of time, we tried to have a good laid out plan of a bunch of things, and then Murphy's Law, that's the day that, you got to go here and do this and go there and do that, or you get a bunch of runs. So we try to make a generalized, just chunked kind of plan for the day. And it's like, hey, we're going to try to accomplish these. Hey, we'll throw out maybe 5 different ideas. Okay, we want to get a couple of these knocked out today, wherever and whenever. Sometimes while doing building inspections, that turns into a hose drill. You're there, you have time or whatnot. When we're going out and doing Saturday sweeps, hanging smoke detectors, we use that as a time to also pull a line. Nobody's saying you can't stretch a line while you're out there doing it. You just have to get your smoke detectors installed. So taking advantage of any of the time that you have out, when you're out on the street and riding around, instead of being buried in your cell phone in the back or whatnot, or that's a great time to sit there and go a little bit, drive a little bit slower, look at your buildings. Like Josh brought up, start figuring out how to estimate the lines while we're walking the streets, doing smoke detectors or anything else, or hydrants. Start estimating. Okay, hey, how far is it to get there? Once we get there, how much hose do we need to operate? So it's not one night or one day's worth of work. It's continual. It's you have to keep it up and keep doing it. So having the right personnel with the right attitude, and letting them know the whys. It's we're going to do this. A lot of people on the outside will look at it and it's like, we'll do this or do that, or I heard this or I heard that, and then they've transferred in or they've come and worked with us one day and they're like, none of that I heard was even the case. You're like, I've never done that much training in one day, or I've never thought about it that way. Some firehouses and some shifts just come to work and then they manage to vanish into all 4 different or 8 different parts of the firehouse, never be heard from again unless there's a run. Typically, we're even as a slightly bigger firehouse for Baltimore, like we're usually gathered around in groups of 3 or more going over something, talking about something. It could be just telling stories or talking about, oh, hey, what happened last shift? Or did you hear C shift ran this fire? Let's go look at it. And you end up over there looking at seeing what happened. Well, what do you think about, oh, well, I talked to so-and-so and they said this is the conditions or this is what they saw. Oh, okay. And it's constant. It's the passion for the job and having the humility that even when you mess up after an incident or after a drill, being able to go over, okay, what did you do and how did that work out? Any improvements? Anything else? I've been wearing a GoPro for quite a while now. The majority of my wearing of that is for me, is so I can see afterwards the little things that I might have missed, the little nuances that I might have missed in the heat of the moment, the fog of war, or whatever you want to call it. When I talked to a friend of mine several years ago that's in the Navy, and he said for a lot of their training missions and their parachute jumps and everything else, they have GoPros on, and specifically just to see all the details that at the second he missed, then he can fine tune exactly where he's standing, where his firearm is pointed, or which way he turned his hand. Oh, that's why I flipped upside down. That's kind of my thing with, how did the hose get wrapped around me? I didn't see that loop that came down that way. Okay, I need to find a better way that way. And taking criticism from each other, and you really need to be like your own worst critic, but accepting of what other people are trying to say to you also.
Yeah, I think what a lot of people forget, or their egos let them forget, is that pulling hose is a depreciable skill. I mean, if I don't care how good of a firefighter you are, you have to practice it. And so I get using Roger as an example. Here's probably an engine company that does a lot more fire duty than a lot of engine companies in the United States of America, and they find a way to practice hose stretching. They find a way to practice a short stretch, practice a long stretch, because of the way their city's situated. In that, so a company that is not as busy it has no excuse for not training, and has no excuse for not doing a good job, because they have more time for training. I mean, I got stuck in a rabbit hole the other night at home on my computer watching YouTube videos of fires, and it made me want to vomit in my mouth by some of the hose stretches. I'm just like, these are, whether they, you hate to say no name, but you don't know the name, you got to look it up on a map, and that's fine. I mean, every town, every city has fires. I mean, it isn't, they don't just happen in Baltimore. They just don't happen in Howard County. They just don't happen in New York. There's fires in every city, or they wouldn't have a fire department. So that you have to practice that, and your lack of training should not come at the failure of you operating onto a fire ground at a fire. I mean, that's not what Citizens Calls for, is to watch the Keystone Cops trying to stretch an attack line. So it takes first acting men like Roger, lieutenants like Josh, and company officers that we have plenty of on the show, and that there's plenty of them across the country that take the time to make sure that their firefighters know their job. And that's the part that gets me. I've been in a fire department where hey, we pulled a hose line last month, we don't need to pull one this month, or well, it shows that you didn't pull one this month at this last fire, and it took us X amount of minutes to get a hose line in service. So I mean, I
always try to say, well, sorry,
but
I was going to say, I always just use an analogy or talk about, so like what Rick Caruso and Mac Williams at 15 engine in DC, they're taking 7,000 to 8,000 runs a year. and they still have they find the time and they make the time to make drills, whether it be on the scene of a run, afterwards, on it, or whatnot. If you can be that busy, that's significantly busier than we are. If you can be like that and make it work, it really goes back to the attitude of the people.
Yeah, and once again, that falls squarely on the company officer. I mean, there, no chief should be dictating to Josh training. As the company officer, Josh should be doing that on his own to make sure. And I know Josh does. I'm preaching to the choir when I'm speaking to Josh about being a good company officer, but it's that there should be no. Well, the department didn't mandate us to do training this month on hoseline pulling, so Lieutenant Burchick, we don't need to do that. I'm sure that doesn't fly very far in Josh's firehouse, no matter where he's working. So, but Josh also has to deal with that thing with no hydrant thing. So I don't deal very well with that. So
yeah, I am super fortunate. I'm largely out of the 3rd Battalion, and I don't have to deal with that as much. But we're also fortunate that we have the dry hydrants, the static sources. We're putting up cisterns all over the place. So even when I'm not, Johnny on the spot with the rural water stuff, we have a fair amount of water around us. But piggybacking on what you said, even when the company officer isn't holding up their end of the bargain, then it goes to the senior firefighter. It goes to the driver. If you're a recruit firefighter right out of the academy and you can see the writing on the wall for your assignment and the people you're surrounded by, go out there. When it's 3 o'clock and people are putting their feet up and they're taking that safety nap, you go ahead and you start pulling lines yourself, and it will be contagious. You can't get in trouble pulling lines and working on the primary points of performance for our job. And then I've totally stolen this from military circles. We need to take something that's difficult and dangerous and make it feel safe. So the more sets and reps that we get in, and the more we stress ourselves, there are so many like elite military circles that when they are in the worst combat of their life, they will tell you that typically their training is just as hard, if not worse, than some of their worst days in their life. It's because they've over time gotten the sets and reps in, they've brought the stress up, and they're learning how to manage all that. Now, that's not happening day one, but over time, building that shift up, that's something you absolutely need to work towards, because when stuff does hit the fan, you need to be able to learn how to deal with these curveballs, manage the stress, and use that adrenaline for good.
I mean, I go back to my first tour in the firehouse in Fairfax, and I won't tell you what year that is because neither one of you were alive. But my first day, I was just so overwhelmed with walking in the firehouse. But the second day, I'm riding with the captain, and probably one of the better captains I've ever worked with. One of the most strict, one of the most disciplined, an ex-military, an ex-naval officer, ex-Navy person. And, the second day is like, hey, Captain, I said, can we pull all these attack lines? Because they don't look like the ones at the training academy. And he says, we'll get to it. And he wasn't being dismissive, but, we had other things to do. And sure enough, an hour after I say this, we go to a work and fire, and I dumped this load on the ground, and it looked like a hot mess. And there was no way we were going to get this thing undone. And he just looked at me and goes, I guess we should have done this a little earlier, to go through it. And it's just, you can't, a good company officer and making that straight, and I dumped this 300-foot load right at the tailboard, and, I was like, oh, this is bad. Let's pull another one. Let's try another one that maybe won't look as bad, but, making sure that people do that stuff right each and every time we go out the door. So, hey, Roger, we only got a couple more minutes here.
Yeah.
I saw one of the notes on here is Alley Olympics. What does that mean?
Let me look at these notes again.
That's all it says. So.
I know. Shorthand for me. I just have to remember where it was. Oh, okay.
The last page.
When we were getting down into a little bit more further into the training aspects, like Josh mentioned before, like you might start off with, hey, this is what you're pulling, this is how you're pulling it. And then once you get more time in and you're going through the reps, then you teach the whys. So Alley Olympics is one of the things a few of us in the Baldwin Rev started talking about. So if you're a second due company or just responsible for going down the alley, going to the rear. Sometimes you might have stretch from the long side of the block. Sometimes you can get lucky being on the top of the short end. But our alleys, you have zero idea before going into it exactly how it's going to play out. It might be nice and well, it's never going to be nice, but it might be free of most trash and debris, and you can actually see the concrete walkway. Or you could have mounds of old cars, mattresses, have to go over a couple fences, around some trees. You're not really sure exactly what you're going to bum dominium or whatever that you have to go across. So that's one of the reasons pushes that we've made for the Minuteman shoulder load lines is prior to 5-10 years ago, when everything outright was flat loaded and you were dragging it through all of that, it took a lot of effort and a lot of manpower. So your 3 or 4 person engine company may or may not get it accomplished in a quick time. But being able to carry hose as opposed to drag it, you're now able to go over those mattresses or possibly over those fences around the turns and bends that are needed to make it work a lot better. So one day stands out where we had to plan. Jeff Darby was working overtime with us, and we ended up having to go down a little walking alley where it's not much wider than your shoulders anyway, make a turn, and then we were in the back, but we had to go over a fence. So we go over that fence, and then, oh no, it's actually burning up in the roof. We need your line up to the second floor. Well, we can't get there from there. We had to go back over the same fence, go back down that walking alley a little bit, go up a ladder to a fire escape, and then go up the fire escape to the bump out. And if all of our hose would have been on the ground, that would have taken forever and probably 2 or 3 engines worth of work. But as it was, 3 of us were able to accomplish that task. One being the apparatus driver, where once he was stretched out on the 400 foot and back to the apparatus, it was pretty much just Jeff and I handling everything, passing the line back and forth over it as the shoulder load over the fence to each other. Okay, hold it, let me jump over now, and whatnot. So once you think about your hose lines and what you have set up and how you have it set up, if you can manage to mitigate all of those obstacles, you may or may not have them. I'm sure Josh can attest to a lot of different obstacles, but the same premise where it might be one of those flag lots that he talked about, and he has to go to the other street, the next street over or whatever, and run next to a house and a pool and who knows what in order to get to the rear. A couple of trees.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's Josh is a very smart dude and figures out, plot depths and lot depths and, what line he's going to need for that. Is that, I think a lot of people get flabbergasted at the lengths of hose like Josh was talking about that departments can use. And I mean, you just got to realize that, you're always not going to need a 200 foot line. You're going to need a 300, you're going to need a 400. You're going to need to add on to it. So you got to be prepared for that. And that only comes through having good training. And, Josh's walk, crawl, run thing, that probably goes for each line on the fire truck. If or each evolution. And, gosh forbid, Josh pulls one out from underneath his hat and says, hey, we're going to pull the 400 and add 200 on it. And then, we need to add another 50, so there's got to be a plan there for it. So. But so look, it's getting out close to our hour. Josh, you got any parting thoughts for the day?
No, I appreciate coming on and just stay disciplined in the training. Get out there. Yeah, like if Mac is running 8,000 calls a year and he's pulling lines, I guarantee you can find time to do it. So just do it. Even if you're not motivated, sometimes motivation is horseshit. Pardon my language. So just go out there and just do the right thing. Hold up your end of the bargain. That's it.
Raj?
Be disciplined, to have the right attitude, create your culture of working with each other, holding each other, talking about we all want to come into work, or know people that come to work and only talk about sports or whatever the case may be. Let's spend a little time talking about the fire service and how we can excel at it. It's talking to my same buddy in the Navy. He's in a very elite unit, and he's like, we have a few special things that we can do or we have access to, but really we're all here because we're masters of the basics. We don't get cute with a lot of shit, and we just have mastered the basics, and that's the overwhelming majority of the time that they spend training on.
Yeah, and Roger hit on it, and I like I used to tell people is that, look, you don't have to be 8 up in the fire department like I am, or like Roger is, or like Josh is. You don't have to eat, breathe, and sleep it like we do. But when you come to work, or you come for a duty night, or you come to a drill at the volunteer firehouse, yeah, now's the time to be invested. Be there. Do your job, do it correctly. Do your training. Look, everybody needs a safety nap every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that I need mine a little bit more than I used to. But hey, we still have to do our job each and every time we go out the door. So look, for fire engineering and Humpday Hangout, I appreciate Josh being on. It's been a long time since we've had Josh on, and I apologize for that. Always good information, always good insight into the fire service. He's still riding the right front seat. He's not riding in a Tahoe like I am. So him and Roger both see the front lines every day, and the people and the women that are riding with them, what their mindset is for the fire service. So they still have their finger on the pulse of everything that's going on a fire truck. So I appreciate that. I appreciate Roger being on. Thanks to Bobby and Peter for allowing us to do that. And that ends it up for today for the Traditions Training and the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. Thanks for being on, and we'll hope to see everybody at FDIC. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.